Legends taking the glory. Legends taking the glory. Legends taking the glory. Legends taking the glory. Taking the glory. Taking the glory. Taking the glory. Girl. Yeah, I never would have been a side.
Yo, what's going on, people? Daniel here, back with a follow-up to my previous Fruits Baskets discussion. After rewatching Fruits Basket Season 2, I thought it would be good to present my thoughts in a more organized form to give you guys a better impression of my view on the season. After my rewatch, my favorite anime from 2020 is definitely Fruits Basket Season 2. It had consistency, an entertaining story, great character development, and as a sequel served as a fantastic follow-up to the first season. As an anime only, the second season demonstrated that this series has high potential to become one of my favorite anime series of all time. And in this discussion, I'd like to cover a few aspects which I really enjoyed and formed part of my reasoning for putting it as my favorite anime of 2020. So before I get into the proper discussion, I wanted to talk about my thoughts on the season as a whole. I liked how the season was structured. The points brought into the narrative all made logical sense. As we mainly covered character introductions in the first season, this meant the second season could really hone in on story progression, allowing us to implement more story details, introduce more characters, and reveal more mysteries that weren't answered in the first season. I liked how it went from, in the first 2 episodes, we were introduced of the idea of an uncertain future, with Tohru feeling the uncertainty of what she's going to do after school, having this idea that she was always going to work, but she wasn't sure if that was going to be a suitable plan. And then later on, when we move on to the beach house arc, we have this introduction of what about the Somas and their future, and how their future's kind of been decided for them already. And then this leads Tohru to want to break the curse, and I liked that the final straw was Akito kind of confirming that Kyo is going to be locked up, similar to the previous cat, and how the other zodiacs will be chained towards her, living at the same place, just not being able to have control. And for Tohru, that was unacceptable, and that's what pushes her to kind of go in her own direction for this season. That's her own plot line. So I like how she came to this conclusion from the uncertain future and how that's affecting the people around her. So in this section, I'm going to talk about a couple moments in the season that I really enjoyed, although if I'm thinking about it, there's a long list of these moments, meaning that I can't include all of them, as I would probably make a whole video in of itself. So if I don't mention your favorite moment, then that's probably the main reason why. So first off, the argument between Manabe and Yuki in episode 13 is definitely one of my favorite scenes of the season. Yuki's monologue in his head after him and Manabe exchange insults, petty insults may I add, and calling him a blockhead. Before I get into the monologue, it's quite interesting to see Yuki involved in this kind of argument with someone who's not Kyo, and it just speaks to the kind of person Manabe is and how similar he was to Kyo, and I believe that's what was triggering Yuki to act in this manner, and also that he brought up Tohru as well. But what I really liked was his monologue in his head when he was talking about himself and how he's the villain that he should be fighting, because I would be lying if I said I haven't been feeling that way before. I can understand what he was expressing in that situation, the way he was projecting his own insecurities onto Manabe. He was giving himself an excuse to get angry. That's what I feel like he was feeling. And then after Manabe kind of apologizes and says he's jealous, I like the honest shock on his face, because I feel that was a breakthrough for Yuki, I guess, in his relationships at school. I don't think someone has ever said those words to him. So for someone to look at his behavior and see a positive aspect, that's what really touched him. And it was the start of a great relationship. I feel like the conflict brought them a lot closer, and we see it later in the season. Another Yuki moment made my highlight reel. His conversation with Tohru in episode 7 is a great moment. It had everything set up for it to be one of the best scenes of the season. It had the visuals, the shooting stars. It even had like a special OST playing in the background as Yuki was thinking his thoughts and speaking to Tohru. And all of these things just create the right atmosphere for us to experience what Yuki wanted to convey in that moment. He had already begun his journey in growing, but I feel like this was like his proper starting line for him to start moving independently and moving away from Tohru. And by that I mean not being so reliant, but starting to move forward from just being cared for, but being able to walk forward too. And a big thing about this conversation is seeing the flashback from his perspective, because it gives us the context we need to realize how important this moment in his life is. Because when we look back on all the flashbacks with him and Akito up until this point, we see that he's in a very dark place, and understanding that and understanding how he was able to help Tohru and how this moment for her is so significant, it's gonna resonate with him even more, because he knows how useful he was in a time when he was feeling pretty useless. So I love how we got to visit that flashback in a different perspective. I always like when stories like to utilize that aspect of their writing, and the expansion on Yuki's thoughts with the music playing in the background really enhanced my experience of the scene. And if I look back retrospectively, this is probably one of the first instances where Yuki tries to express his feelings for Tohru and how they're not just feelings of romantic love, but something different than that. Especially when I consider that early in the episode we see Tohru's motherly nature being highlighted, which can be linked to what we see later on in the season. Another one of my favorite moments as a Kyo fan, it had to be episode 9. One of the best episodes in the first half of the season for me. Had so many good moments sprinkled in with it, I couldn't not mention it. The conversation between Akito and Kyo was one that I welcomed, because we hadn't really seen these two interact before, and we knew that the situation or the relationship between these two would not be the best. Akito says several things to Kyo which interested me. When she says, I always make that mistake. You're always quick to make me the villain, and I'd feel bad to involve her, Kazuma, or others more than you have already. Those lines are very interesting to me, especially when I think about Kyo's connection to Tohru's mum, Kyoko. The first line referencing the villain makes me think about the character of Ren and how that she might be a bigger antagonist than Akito, and how she might be more involved in some of the wrongdoings of the Somo family. Whereas the second line makes me think about Kyoko's death, because when we go to the grave visit in season 1, we know that Kyo was rather apprehensive in that whole journey. Being there, you could tell Hanejima was like, your waves are very off. And in this episode, they make a direct flash to Kyoko on the ground with the blood around her, making me believe that Kyo was probably there when she died, or he saw the body, I don't know, and that the accident might have not even been an accident. So scary stuff. And then the second moment I wanted to mention from this scene is just him running down the hill when it's like confirmed. Not even when it's confirmed, just the flashback with him talking to Shisho. That was an amazing scene, talking about the flower, what does it mean to just protect one flower, it doesn't matter. And then him admitting that he knew what his master was telling him the whole time, understanding. And then we have the flashbacks of Kyoko. So I'm guessing like we had the first scene, and then what I want to believe is, this is just my own theory, is that when Kyoko ran out on Tohru, she somehow met Kyo and then I don't know, those two started talking, because she, in one of the flashbacks, she was talking about her daughter, and I think she had the long hair, so it might have been during that time, it might not have been, it might have been a different time, but that's just what I want to believe. During that whole scene when he's running down the hill, the OST, probably one of my favorite music tracks on the season. It's called I'm the One Who's Always Saved, which is such a fitting song. Tohru has saved Kyo, and in some ways he might feel he's the one who's always been saved by her. And it's funny because Yuki feels that way as well. And it's sad because at the end of that episode, when you still see the flash, and it's like, I will never forgive you. I don't know if that was a scene that confused me, because I think Kyoko was saying that, but I don't know why she would be saying that to Kyo. So just to round up, episode 9 was just a complete banger with moments that I loved, and to be honest, the season was filled with multiple moments which I loved, but I can't talk about them here. I'll try and talk about them throughout the other portions of the video, so stay tuned, and let's transition to the next section. So Tohru this season has been very interesting. This season I saw a lot more Sidesir as a person, and although everyone knows that Tohru is a wonderful, caring, kind individual, she's also a second year high schooler who has lost her parents at a very young age. And even though there was a lot happening during the season, so there were times where the focus was shifted away from Tohru, it became clear through various subtle moments throughout the season that Tohru isn't okay at this point in time. And we see earlier that Yuki mentions about opening the lid, and what I think he meant in that moment was that he needed to become comfortable in revealing his inner emotions and his inner thoughts to trust in others. But Tohru hasn't been able to do this completely for herself. Tohru is definitely the person in Momoji's story who puts all their energy into supporting others, but doesn't realize the impact that she has on herself and the effect that the stress has on her own well-being. And as I mentioned before, I liked how subtle these moments are where we see Tohru kind of not being cool in this season. We see it in the first 2 episodes where like she's stressed about the future because she knows she's gonna have to leave the Soma house, and that moment it was kind of a thing where you're like, okay, yeah, it's natural for her to feel that way. But then if we skip ahead to episode 6, we see when Hiro mentions about, okay, you're always carrying around your mother's picture, you have a complex, what about your dad, how come you don't carry his picture around? And you see for a brief moment that Kisa notices, like her face just pauses, and then she laughs it off. And then later that same episode, we see her late at night on the balcony holding a picture of her mom, saying it's okay, we're always together. And when I first saw that, I was like, yeah, that's very strange. Okay, there's something up with that. And then fast forward to episode 14, after she visits her grandfather who had become ill, he hurt his back, and then he's like, oh yeah, I want to see Katsuya and Kyoko, and then he kind of just stops talking, and it's like, oh, did he die? But he's just sleeping. But think about how that affects Tohru, who has lost both of her parents, and you can tell like she's like, please don't say that. And you can see she's visibly shaken, but she's trying to put up a brave front. As she's walking back, she's like, things are flashing through her mind, the memories, and we see like a flashback from, I think, just after her dad's passing, where the mom leaves, and she's like, we see just before that she says, I want to see him. So what I want to believe is that, similar to what happened with the grandfather, she goes, I want to see him, then leaves Tohru in the house by herself. And for a young person at that age, she looked very young. that's gotta be very scary, to be left alone after your dad's passed away and your mom has left after saying I want to see him, and if he's dead, where's she gonna go? So I can understand the emotions Tohru was feeling in that moment. That's probably why she shot it away. And then we can fast forward again to episode 19, I believe, where she's holding Rin, and Rin is crying because of she's going through. She's been alone, and you have Tohru, she's holding her and she's crying. She's like, I understand how painful it is to be alone. And like that moment it's nice because she's comforting Rin, but it's also kind of sad because like you can see that's empathy. You can see in her eyes she understands the feeling and she can relate to it. It's so painful for her. And then later in that episode, or it's the next one, I'm pretty sure it's the same one though, we have Rin mentioning that people hide things that they don't want to show people behind the door, and it will build up, and once you go past a breaking point, it can't return back to normal. And she references the scene with her parents, and she's talking about how Haru helped to slowly open that door so that she could learn to talk about those things. And she's wondering, okay, who's gonna do that for Tohru? She's hoping that someone can do that for her. And I'm gonna talk about this later, but that's probably gonna be Kyo. We've seen throughout the season that that is the person who has been constantly going to Tohru's aid in this season, slowly but surely opening that door. And I assume in the third season we'll get to see a lot more with that. But to conclude, I like the complexities that have been introduced for Tohru because it actually answers a lot of questions that I had relating to her, such as like, how did she overcome her mother's death? It's pretty clear in this season that there's something that she just buried. She didn't really come to accept it. And what about her father? How come she doesn't talk about her father as much? I feel like there's probably some underlying some weirdness to that situation because of what her grandfather said. So I'm excited for the third season because I feel like that's when it's going to be addressed. But yeah, Tohru is a great character, and I'm hoping she can work through her issues. Hopefully Kyo can do his work, and also Yuki too, because he said he doesn't want to just be the one helped, he wants to also give something back. So looking forward to that. Now first, I wasn't actually going to talk about Akito, but it wouldn't be right for me to be discussing the season and not mention the main antagonist. So let's get into this bag of worms, or whatever the phrase is. Akito Soma. As an antagonist, she definitely does her job well. She makes you, let me rephrase that, I dislike a lot of her actions that were shown this season. She is a terrorist. I mentioned in my previous video, she is a very spiteful person, I believe, and I don't like a lot of what she did this season, but I feel like it was definitely necessary. She needs to be that person that we are kind of blaming right now. But don't get it twisted, even though I dislike her actions, that doesn't mean I hate the character or the person. Because for me, I believe that even though it's really easy for me to say, oh yeah, I hate Akito, I don't like her, and I mean obviously I wouldn't want to be friends with Akito, but to say I hate her, I can't really say I want to dedicate a portion of my energy solely to dislike this fictional character, because I think it's pretty evident that there are reasons for the result that we see today, that is Akito. I know there's plot reasons, I know there's a backstory that kind of but led to her becoming this way, and we kind of see that in the last episode when we see the curse break with Kureno, and that was probably the twist that caused Akito to become this twisted individual, because Yuki did mention that even though when he was with Akito before, she was always kind of a bit of a pagan, but like she was more like a spoiled brat who, you know, that spoiled brat who got all the toys in the class and you only had like a Game Boy but they had the Nintendo DS, but like she let you play with it for like one game, but then she turned into an ex-bully where she's gathering all the guys in the class to like beat you up. So it was a drastic shift and she was drawing on the walls we saw. So we know obviously people don't just change like that, and I think the curse breaking is probably gonna, well, the people who get their bonds, the curse broken, is slowly gonna cause her to go insane, because they were saying that the god can't survive without the zodiac. So I'm guessing when the curse breaks, or it broke for Kureno, that kind of caused a bit of Akito to go a bit insane, because like a piece of her was lost. One final point about Akito is his relationship with this character Ren. Now I don't know who Ren is in relation to Akito, but I know that Akito has a strong hate for Ren, as Hattori mentions that Ren, saying the name Ren is forbidden around Akito, and during episode 10 when Akito has to return to the Soma household, she mentions that, or I believe it's Shigure, mentions that someone or she is causing trouble again. So what I gained from that on my rewatch of the season is that even though we didn't get to see much from Akito, that there is a lot of family politics within the Soma household, and Ren seems to be one of the key troublemakers in the family when it comes to Akito, at least. Yuki has become one of my favorite characters over the course of the season. His growth has been amazing to see, and a lot of my favorite moments of the season feature him or are related to him. His relationship with Ayame is great. I like how we started the season focusing on their background and how Yuki has grown to trust his brother more and gave him a second chance. Yuki's interactions with the student council are where he begins to shine, and where I feel we see the most significant growth. The inclusion of the student council was a great choice, as it was an opportunity for Yuki to interact with his own group. Yuki and Manabe are a great duo. His personality draws similar to Kyo in the fact that he's able to draw people to him, but we see there are other aspects that separate him from Kyo. Manabe isn't afraid to challenge Yuki and causes Yuki to say things directly rather than talking around things. By doing this, Yuki learns to express his true feelings and open the quote-unquote lid. We also see Yuki with Hatsuharu. Hatsuharu supports Yuki constantly throughout the season and tells him it's okay for him to prioritize himself. Yuki is a kind man. His forgiveness of Akito is a top tier moment in the season. The monologue where he states he's tired of blaming others for when things go wrong is a perfect example of his personal development, and it displays a high level of maturity. I really like the line, "If I always blame someone / something, I'll never change." It really resonates with me, and I share the same belief. While there may be situations where you aren't solely to blame, you can never grow if you don't reflect on your own actions. It's only through self-reflection that growth can occur. I really respect Yuki's mindset in this moment, and it shows how far he's come. I've never really been a fan of ranking things or choosing a single option for favorites, but the episode which hit me the most was 18, featuring Rin's backstory. Learning the trials Rin has experienced and her inner thoughts gave us insight into her actions in the previous episodes. The episode evoked many emotions within me both times I watched it. I have to say, Rin's parents by far are the worst in Fruits Baskets. These guys definitely have the trifecta of terrible parenting, neglect combined with physical and mental abuse, no self-awareness plus selfishness. It's terrible. And Haru really channeled my feelings in that hospital scene when they had the cheek to state, "We don't want you," like kids decide to be born. That scene makes me angry. It always makes me angry. I'm not sure how the series is gonna end, but I need to see some serious repercussions for them. But moving on to greener pastures, seeing the romance between Haru and Rin blossom was lovely. I love how he's been a supporting figure from young for Rin, and he's always been there, slowly just chipping away at her cold exterior, letting her know that he's there for her. And I've seen people describe their relationship as the most passionate in the series, and I definitely agree. I think my favourite scene with them was Haru confessing his love, just stating bluntly that he wants to be with Rin, and even though he knows about the consequences and that he doesn't want to lose Rin because he was afraid of Akito. Their relationship is one of the best in the series, and I hope by the end we get to see them together again. The final scene between Akito and Rin was sad. I was very annoyed after watching it. Akito, he went too far. She went too far, sorry. The final push out the window was, for me, I felt like that was almost murder, what Akito did. And we see during the season, Akito goes a bit over the top, such as with Yuki when he bottled Yuki for saying he doesn't want to blame other people for what happens to him. That's another example of Akito being a bit whack, but that's neither here nor there. Why I dislike Akito pushing Rin out the window so much is because she had already berated Rin with a lot of venom, and like to the point where Rin was already kind of done, like she was broken at that point. Especially like it was like Akito knew the words to break her down. Like she's like, oh, I don't want you. She said that as she pushed her out as well. I really don't like that from Akito, man. She needs to reap the consequences of that action. I need to see some consolation or whatever. I need to see an apology, bruv. The scene with Rin falling out the window was a beautiful but sad and emotional scene for me. It had the same OST from episode 7, the special ending. I like the flashback with all her memories coming in about Haru, how she wants to protect Haru, how she doesn't want Haru to be hurt. It just really shows the depth of her love for him and how much she treasures him and doesn't want him to be hurt because of her. It's so sad, but it's also it's beautiful in a way. But that's just one of the few things that make that episode. It really hits on the emotional levels, I feel. And even Yuki's backstory, that hit on the emotional levels, but I feel Rin was a bit more, it hit me a bit more than Yuki's one. Yuki's was more, it answered a lot more questions about him and made me relate to him a lot more about how he was as a person. So originally I was going to talk about the ships, but I think I'm going to expand that to relationships between the characters, because that's one of the best aspects of this series. So first of all, I want to mention Hiro and Kisa as a pairing. They're one of my favorite parents in the show, which is kind of weird because they're like the kids, but those two, whenever they interact, it always warms my hump to see. And I like how in the beach arc, that even though they had their little misunderstanding, that they both kind of went out of their way to reach out to the other and resolve their conflicts. And it kind of shows how mature they are for their age. And I like how Hiro took it upon himself to reflect on his words, because that was something we knew he had a sharp tongue, to put it simply. And throughout the season we see a few moments with them here and there. It seems like they're getting along well, so I'm happy for them. But moving on to Hattori and Maya. Ooh, that was a pairing I didn't expect to happen, but I'm happy because Hattori is my guy, and although his relationship with Kana is gone and it still burns me to this day, him in Maya, he has another shot at a relationship. And although in general I'm kind of a bit mixed on the ship because of the way the previous one ended, because Kana is probably gonna keep going on in ignorance, not knowing that she was in an intimate relationship with Hattori. And I hate that Akito was the one that caused it to go wrong. But sometimes things just don't work out and you might not get a second chance. I think that's quite a realistic message to take from that experience. And even if Hattori and Kana were to go back together, I don't really think it would have been the same. So I feel like it was right for them to conclude that little relationship there. But bottom line, I'm happy for Happy because it seems like the relationship with Mai was successful, because at the end of the episode 12, we see like a little time skip. Mai's got the short hair and we see Hattori beside her, so I'm happy that he had a successful relationship with her. And I think I mentioned beforehand Haru and Rin, so I'm not going to go too deep into them, but like their relationship is beautiful. They play off each other quite well, and even though Rin's being a bit, abrasive to him right now, we know like when things go back to normal and it's all cool, she's gonna go running back into his arms. I can't wait for that. Other relationships I'd like to mention were the Yuki and Machi relationship. One thing I really liked was that Machi doesn't see Yuki as a prince, and that's a big thing, because if it was during the school that everyone only sees the front that Yuki puts up, or it seems like that he puts up, he comes up as a prince to most people in the school and someone who's like an upper figure. He's that guy, someone that is desired by most of the girls. But Machi, even though she hasn't known him for a long time, she's from the outside world, she's able to see that he's not anything like that. It's just the projections that people have put onto him to build him up into that figure. And I like that she's able to just say he's not a prince. She said that he's an airhead, and I think that's what will probably lead to Yuki wanting to pursue something further with her, because she's the first person to notice that he's not anything like that. And like the prince thing is actually kind of an insult for him because of the idea that it creates in people's heads. And I also like how Yuki's able to see beneath, I'm not sure see beneath, but he's able to get Machi to open up a bit more. We see that she was a lot more flustered just from a short conversation with Yuki, just from the things he was saying. And I can tell in season 3 that there'll be a lot more interactions between the two, and I'm really looking forward to that. And also I wanted to mention the relationship between Yuki and Tohru. I really like that Yuki can trust Tohru fully, and how much he respects her and wants the best for her because of how she has helped him grow. And what I like the most is that he understands his weakness, and he understands that Tohru helped him stand up, but that doesn't mean he needs her to help him walk too. I like that he acknowledged Tohru. What he wanted from Tohru was not a romantic love, but a motherly love. And that even though he has really benefited from Tohru's influence in his life, he doesn't want a relationship where he's the only one receiving something. He wants to give back as well. It's not something he wants. He doesn't want to just be cared for. And one thing that I like on Tohru's side is that as Yuki kind of becomes a lot more independent and I guess less reliant, and kind of only goes to Tohru for like affirmation, Tohru is able to adjust, and what she does is moves back into a less prominent, but she's still there to support and reassure him. So in this season we see some significant development in Kyo and Tohru's relationship. There have been numerous moments within the season showing these two interacting, and it's been wonderful to see. One thing that is clearly evident in this season is that Kyo has a deep understanding and pays close attention to Tohru. Several moments within the season we see this. I think the most notable one for me is during the beach house. After Hiro says what he says to Tohru, she starts to act a bit down and off-putting, and Kyo is the only one to pick up on that. And it's not even that he noticed that her behavior was off, it's that he asked her what was wrong. She asked about Kyo's parents, and he was like, oh okay, I got you. Just from that one question, he understood what was bugging her and was like, yo, you tripping, man. Like, what our parents do have nothing to do with you. And that just shows how he's able to, I guess, he just understands Tohru on a deeper level compared to the other characters in the show. And it would be one thing if it was just one moment. We see after she visits her grandfather, like she was down bad, and she even said it herself, Kyo came down like one heavenly figure, because he was on his way back home and he realized, yo, why am I just gonna go straight home when I know she's gonna be feeling away after visiting her grandfather? And he turns back, and it's just those actions, the proactiveness, that shows how he feels about Tohru and how he's very passionate about making sure she's okay, or determined. I don't think passionate was the right word there. And then where I say he pays attention to detail is when he knows her character so well, he can kind of predict what she's gonna do without her having to tell him. Like when he knew she was gonna buy zodiac figures on the school trip, and that she went to visit Rin just because she brought out jelly. Because the Rin one is actually kind of mad to me, because like, how could you just clock she went to visit Rin just because she brought out jelly? That just shows that this man's understanding is different. And I think that's when it kind of becomes more explicit. And what I love the most about this relationship is the different aspects of Tohru you get to see through Kyo interacting with her. And to expand on this, Kyo is, to put it Rin's way, he's on his way to opening the door for Tohru so that she can express what she's been hiding deep within herself. And we see this positively in when they're like kind of flirting, because after the whole Rin situation, he says that she's a bit obvious, and you can see she's kind of embarrassed and she's like putting up her front. And that behavior I haven't seen from Tohru before. She's normally quite chill, or she gets kind of flustered, but to see frustration from her was very interesting. So I mentioned that we had to see Tohru's more unknown positive side in her playful frustration, but we also get to see her be more vulnerable and some of her insecurities revealed when she's with Kyo too, as we see in the beach house arc when Kyo talks to her, and also in episode 2 when we're talking about Soman. And just to end off, the revelation that Kyo knows Tohru's mom adds another layer of complexity to their relationship, especially if my idea that Kyo knows the true nature of Kyoko's death, that will definitely make their relationship a lot more interesting than what it already is. And I really appreciate that the author added this detail in, because after the first season I didn't think that there was much left for the development of these two characters' relationship in the story after the reveal that Kyo has a secret form and all them things there. So thank you, author, for keeping Kyo in the game. So to summarize, this season was a great experience. It was amazing both times I watched it, and I really appreciate the story developments we got and the characters we were introduced to. And before I close off, it wouldn't be right for me to not mention the opening and the ending. Both of them were amazing, especially that second ending. Wow, that was a banger, especially with the visuals too. It wasn't animated, but the images of our zodiacs and Tohru, beautiful man. If I had to rate the season, it's 10 out of 10, complete banger. Shout out to the music director, OSTs was on point. Yeah, but you know what it is, it was a bit of a long one still, but I had a lot to say and I wanted to expand on some things from the first video, so I hope you enjoyed it. Leave a like on the video if you liked it, comment below, hit us up on the socials, links in the description, subscribe if you're new, more content coming soon, and I'll catch you in the next one. Deuces. Check it on, check it on.